This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining us this evening. And thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Leon Brathwaite and Jason McPhee, for joining me on this emergency version of Libertarian Counterpoint. We had a show planned for you, but we lost it. So we get to do it again. And Leon and Jason are saving my bacon tonight.
The knuckleheads of liberty are in the house.
That's right. Imagine that the knuckleheads are saving Counterpoint.
Yeah, well, you guys happen to be around, right? So that's what happens. When your life is boring, you get to be around. All right, gentlemen, so we're going to do this one again. Main topic tonight, the science of COVID authoritarianism. Who's to blame for the authoritarian response? And this came about because there was scientists who were recently asked, we're in a podcast of some time, my brain is fried now, that he said, it's not our fault. Don't blame us for the actions of the politicians and the policymakers. We had nothing to do with it. Except that we all know that's a lie, right? Because their proclamations are what the policymakers use as an excuse to violate our constitutional and human rights. So you can't sit there and say, hey, it's not my fault, when you were the people who were to blame, really. I mean, quite literally to blame for what the policymakers decided. Am I wrong here? Or what?
Well, technically, they are correct because they didn't implement policy. They just advise the policymakers, right? Whether it's the president or whoever the top members of the administration who was on the COVID task force. So technically, they're right in that sense. However, these people were all over TV, all over social media, lying to us, scaring us to death. And this action by these so-called scientists is what led our policymakers to make some of the most disastrous policies ever in U.S. history. And why do I say disastrous? It was about a loss of liberty. That is what this thing came down to, that many of us lost our liberty because of the advice of some of these scientists. But the most egregious thing that was done, it was done to our children. Now, I think it is well now established that children are the least vulnerable to the COVID virus, the least vulnerable. The elderly is on the opposite side of the spectrum. But yet, our policymakers, the president or whoever it is, on the advice of these lying scientists, locked down our schools. Our children lost a year, maybe two, of learning. Maybe it will never be recovered. I don't know. We are yet to see the full impact of this. So it is true that they are technically correct, but these lying, I don't want to use the word, I could have said it, these lying, you could fill in the blank, are really and truly the catalyst that caused many of the problems that resulted in the loss of liberty and the loss of learning of many of our children in our society.
Right, Jason, and we know, right, we now have cables from the State Department that they knew, or they had a fairly decent idea that it was a lab leak, right? Where they knew that patient zero were people in the lab.
Yes.
Right. So essentially we knew, and yet they lied to us. And many of us sitting here at this table, we were shadow banned, if not outright, got not copyright strikes, but whatever, their misinformation strikes on our channel that were later taken away. But the point is, we lost our freedom of speech, did we not?
Well, yeah, certainly. Speech was the first casualty of COVID, it appears. But we saw that in many ways. But one of the things I kind of wanted to dive into on this issue is the incestuous relationship that we've seen between government and science. So much science is funded through government, and government has a lot of sway on who's getting research dollars and who's it kind of approved. I mean, one of the stories I've heard recently is that that there's a what is it? Some kind of a DEI statement or something like that that researchers have to get right when they submit these proposals.
Yes.
That they have to talk about their diversity and equity and inclusion and all this when they're scientists, and it may have nothing to do with what they're talking about, and yet they have to have all of this information in these proposals. This is kind of like sort of an indoctrination. It's not about what your PhD is and how strong it is and what your past research was. It has to do with somehow how you fill in these political boxes, which is just getting kind of disgusting. And we saw this with when you talk about the lab leak thing. When Fauci first came forward, with this whole thing of trying to say it was coming from a wet market, apparently he had tried to put together a small team of scientists. This wasn't like a public debate. Where did this come from? This was like sort of an in-house thing that he put together. And some of these scientists, the documents are coming out, actually said, "Hey, this probably came from the lab," and then he essentially, gave them some research grants, and suddenly they all changed their stories, right? Because he was in control of billions upon billions of dollars of research that he could grant people. And a lot of this stuff is important if somebody wants tenure, if they need to publish to stay relevant in their universities, other things like that. They have to get this, these research grants from NIH or other places as well. So from the government. So this is, really disturbing. I guess this perversion of the science that's happening because of its close relationship to government and politics.
Yeah,
and that's a very valid point.
Set something up, Leon. You can control science by exactly as Jason just pointed out, right? By funding, and if the funding goes where the person who controls the funding wants it to go, that's where the funding goes, and that's where the corruption of science happens. Is because these people can't go out against Fauci. Right? Because not only will they lose their funding, they won't get next one. Maybe they have this round of funding is secure, but what about the next round? Right? You can't go against the bureaucracy. You can't fight City Hall. Well, you can't fight the federal bureaucracy, correct?
Well, that is absolutely true what you're saying, James. That is true. But we have a deeper problem here about this COVID here that we haven't yet mentioned. I think we have emails to prove that our NIH, our federal government, through a third party, was funding the Wuhan virology lab, the one where the virus leaked from, as
the gain of function research, which Rand Paul has been hammering to try and get out of Fauci. Did you fund this? And he keeps saying, "Well, it depends upon what you call gain of function."
Nonsense like that, like we are a bunch of damn idiots, and stuff. So this whole set of loss of liberties and all the lies that were told to us, all of this was like a big cover up for the work that Fauci and company was funding in Wuhan. And the thing is, there is an email of I think it was from Francis Collins or one of them, when it started to come out that this thing may have came from the lab. Fauci and Francis Collins got together and and there's an email that said we got to put this story down hard and quick, or something to that effect.
I think, Leon, I think it was specifically related to the whole lockdown issue, and this had to do with Jay Bhattacharya, and Jay Bhattacharya was pushing the the Great Barrington
Declaration.
Yeah, Great Barrington Declaration. Yeah, and essentially what he was saying is that, look, lockdowns, this is ridiculous. This isn't going to work, locking everybody down. We need targeted, policy to look at, different cohorts Old people obviously affected different than young people. Locking everybody down is insane. That's not what, we should do. And he said, look, all our past public health guidance is not to do that. And that's what he was trying to say in the Great Barrington Declaration. And Francis Collins and Fauci had emails going back saying, hey, we've got to slam this guy hard and fast, to take him down. And it's just crazy. This is like mafiosos or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was related to the leak itself, but it might have been something else I was thinking about. But okay, fair enough.
No, I'm sure there's other emails, Leon. Probably go to that too.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of emails. We know that the government likes to manipulate the conversation, right? And that's the real danger out of this, is how easily we all turned those people who are supposed to protect us from the big government, the media, turned and were simply walked hand in hand with big government to shut up the little people, not realizing that at some point it's that's those weapons that they used on us will eventually get turned on them as well, because that's how power works. But we've got a message from our friend Mr. Richard Fields. So, Richard likes to talk about the Fed, so we're going to find out what he's got to say.
You've heard the saying, time is money. Clearly, the elapsing of time is life. Time is money, time is life, therefore money is life. Not in the money-grubbing sense, but in the sense that money is a way of accounting for what your time working is worth to your boss or customer. It works pretty well as long as the monetary unit of account is universally agreed upon and maintains a stable value. Gold or silver coins work. The quantity of available gold and silver does not change much. Annual mining output is a small fraction of the amount of silver and gold already mined. Bitcoin works theoretically. The supply of Bitcoin is a hard quantity, has a hard quantity limit. What does not work as well is money controlled by governments, fiat currency. The dollar and every other national currency is a fiat currency. Its value depends on how much exists. Since all dollars are literally lent into existence, first by central banks and then by commercial banks, the quantity is, shall we say, flexible. Traditional economists, both Keynesian and monetarist, think that's a feature, not a bug. In their hubris, they imagine they can manipulate money and credit to cause never-ending prosperity for all. That has never happened, and it never will. Centuries of economic history have demonstrated that price controls ultimately never produce the intended result. Interest is the price of borrowing money. Yet central banks think that by controlling the price of money, they can somehow make the economy work better. They can't, and they never will be able to. But by trying, they can do untold economic damage. The U.S. central bank, the Federal Reserve System, has been fixing the price of money since the 1970s. As a result, prices are 7.5 times higher on average now than they were in 1971. Some prices, namely the prices of common stocks, have risen considerably faster. The S&P 500 is worth 203 times what it was in 1970. Meanwhile, average middle-class hourly earnings in real dollars have hardly budged. That's why we have a huge gap between the wealthiest 10%, they own the stocks, and the rest of us. That's what is causing the class warfare that threatens to destroy the fabric of our society. It cannot be fixed by taxing high-income earners more. They own Congress through their lobbying efforts. They will always be protected by loopholes, subsidies, and such. It cannot be fixed by raising the minimum wage. That has been proven over time to do little but increase unemployment among the poorest of the poor. It can only be fixed by scrapping the ability of central banks, the Fed in the U.S., to fix interest rates, the price of borrowing, and manipulate money supply by quantitative easing and tightening. You may be wondering what that would leave for the Fed to do. The answer is pretty much nothing. End the Fed.
A message for a libertarian heart, right? And it's interesting we talked about the Fed and how it manipulates the money supply. Well, we can also talk about how Hunter Biden and the Biden family is manipulating the justice system. We found out today that Hunter Biden's, shall we say, legal issues were, I don't want to say solved, were made to dissolve somewhat, right? He's got, what was it called? Leon, what were the charges again?
He had tax evasion, two counts of tax evasion, and one count of the gun charge, which he'll go into some pretrial diversion program.
And by the way, I think this is just what he pled guilty to, right? I mean, there could have been more charges, but this was part of the deal. So
right, the plea deal. And I'm just curious if some of the brown kids in my neighborhood had the similar charges, if they had gotten such a light slap on the wrist, especially considering his history. It's not like this is the first time he's ever, walked across legal trouble, is it, right? I mean, there's something doesn't smell good in Denmark, right? There's something rotten in Denmark, or whatever the saying is.
It's not Denmark. It's not Denmark. It doesn't smell good. It's another D word. It's Delaware.
Delaware doesn't smell good, huh?
Not at all.
Especially when Biden's there.
But I mean, it just seems very strange to me at a time where we're talking about holding the powerful accountable and all that nonsense, that the son of one of the most powerful people in the planet is all of a sudden getting a sweetheart deal. That it's not like we all knew that no matter what, he was going to get a sweetheart sentencing, right? Because that was just going to happen. You can't actually put him in a prison with general population. It's just not doable. But you didn't necessarily have to treat him with kid gloves on the charges, correct? You could have sent him to.
Well, I think what's happening here is that they are trying to short circuit the investigation into Joe Biden, right? So all of this stuff is heading toward Joe Biden, money for the big guy, bags of cash for the big guy, all because it's coming through Hunter Biden. And since Hunter Biden's hot with FBI and others looking into him, even though they've dragged their feet for an awful long time on this stuff, still a lot of the attention has been getting heated ever since they tried to squash that laptop story before the last election. And I think the issue is, if they can say, okay, well, he's already dealt with those charges, so we don't have to worry about anything anymore, and we can stop our investigation, right? That's the big issue, is stopping the investigation, because they were finding all of these LLCs, with millions of dollars going back and forth between all these companies the Bidens own and have interest in that don't make anything. They're literally just transferring money from foreign governments that finds its way into Biden pockets. And and when I say Biden pockets, I don't just mean the big guy Joe Biden. I mean a lot of his family members too. So
far there have been nine Biden members of the Biden family who have gotten money through these mysterious benefactors.
Yeah. And by the way, one thing I wanted to bring up, because almost everybody seems to miss this point. The Democrats were so hot on the whole Trump impeachment thing the first time around, and most of them have no clue over what that's about. They understand there was a phone call to the prime minister or the president of Ukraine.
The president of Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. And they understand that Trump was trying to get an investigation going on Hunter Biden, it sounds like, or at least you get this prosecutor reinstated. But the issue is, the story goes back farther than that. When Biden was vice president, and this is all out there, Biden has literally admitted to this on camera in front of a think tank. It's out there, and our press just has zero curiosity to mainstream media. But essentially what happened was, Biden, as vice president, this prosecutor was looking into Burisma, which Hunter Biden was sitting on the board of, just collecting these bags of cash for dad, essentially, right? And why was he sitting on the board? He's admitted on television on an interview that he has no knowledge of the natural gas industry at all. I mean, he's got no knowledge of this. So how he gets to be, and well, his dad was, overseeing foreign aid, from the Obama administration to Ukraine, right? And so essentially, he threatened the prime minister. He said, "You tell that you cancel that."
Fire the prosecutor.
Yeah, you fire that prosecutor who's looking into that company, or you're not getting your foreign aid, right?
Exactly.
And he literally brags about this, and then he says, "Well, son of a gun," after he says it, he is going to tell Obama, then they fired the prosecutor. He bragged about it in front of a think tank, right? That's exactly what they were trying to go after Trump for, and Trump was only trying to get the prosecutor reinstated. So
Yes.
you can't make this stuff up. It's absolutely insane how corrupt the Bidens are. Sorry, I've just monopolized.
No, but there is a larger issue here. Okay, there's a larger issue here. I mean, yeah, the Bidens are corrupt. There's no doubt about that. But the larger issue is the actions of our Department of Justice, headed by Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland had a little bit of a name as a judge, as a federal judge. I think he was on the appeals court, but then he became the Attorney General in the Biden administration. But this man seemed to be on a vendetta against Republicans. His job description, as far as he's concerned, is to protect the Bidens. But the larger issue that comes out of this is the threat to the rule of law, which is one of the foundational pillars of this land. Because what we are seeing, and we are seeing a lot of it, is we are seeing the tolerance, the tolerance of lawlessness, because there's a lot of lawlessness going on with the Bidens, and the Justice Department don't seem to be too concerned about it. But we also having these selective prosecutions. Now, I'm not here to defend Donald Trump, but I'm here to defend the rule of law. So look at Donald Trump. Look at what is happening to Donald Trump right now, and compare to how the same Justice Department handled the Hillary Clinton case, who was another powerful Democrat who was married to our ex-president, a former president. Look at the difference. And I could argue, and I think successfully, that what Hillary Clinton did was far worse than what Donald Trump is accused of.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
Well, no, we're gonna have to kick this one down the road because we're already swung. But we're not going to change subjects that much, right? We all know there's lots of corruption going on in the in politics, and the reality is we can talk about how corrupt Trump or the Clintons or the Bidens are, but the reality is that's still just the surface. But we find out, Leon was talking about the rule of law, but the difference in the United States when they're talking about the rule of law was the government was supposed to be held to the same rule of law that the rest of us were, right? The average peasants has always been held to the rule of law, right? That's nothing new. It's been since the beginning of time. What was different in the United States is that the government was supposed to be held to that same rule of law. But as we now know, intelligence services are evading the Fourth Amendment by buying the data they are banned from collecting. They just buy it from Facebook or Google or whatever, but they're banned from collecting it. So it seems to me that if you're banned from collecting it, that also means you're banned from paying somebody else to collect it for you. That's
well, and I think they're barred from collecting it without a warrant. I think that's the big issue, and here they're able to just buy it without a warrant. So
yes, if you want to, if you get a warrant and you want to go buy it because it's simply faster to go buy it, great, knock yourselves out. But they're just sitting here collecting data for, as we all know, right? This is nothing new for us from Snowden and Julian Assange. We all know that the government is essentially watching everything we do. But the reality is how many people are willing to go along with it while they're sitting there on the other side of the discussion saying we need to hold groups accountable. There's a rule of law and, we must hold the powerful accountable. But they don't seem to want to hold the powerful accountable when they're holding the power.
That's true.
That's right.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead. That's right.
This one I kind of have mixed feelings about, and I certainly don't think I think we're in a very bad place, that we've gotten to the point where we've created this monster where government is literally it's almost legally able to collect this stuff now through this loophole, that essentially could lead us to right into a 1984 type of situation, right? In 1984, I mean Orwell, but this is pretty scary that they could just buy all this information. But that said, I think back to John McAfee, and if you're sort of a libertarian type, you might know he's the guy who invented that software security that you used to see your internet for McAfee systems that used to be on your computer a lot of times. But he used to warn everybody that, hey, look, there is a very high price to all these free apps that you're collecting, that you're putting on your phone, that you're putting in your computer, and the idea is that the product is you, and they're collecting all this data. And when you sign those forms, you are essentially creating a contract where, hey, yeah, you can spy on me. You can spy on me in my house. You can spy on me where I'm driving my car somewhere. I'm giving you permission to look at all this stuff. And a lot of people have no idea how much they're giving up, but they just sign it away. And so consequently, if these companies can sell this information to anybody, and then to say that our government can't buy it, it is kind of a strange situation. If a foreign government could buy this information on us legally and our own government wouldn't be able to. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's just a very strange situation, and it's kind of complex. So,
well,
yeah.
The difference is no other government or marketing company can put me in jail because I said something wrong. All right, that's the difference. China can't punish me because I did something wrong. They can just make a file and wag their finger at me. I don't care if companies want to.
Our government could, but our government could, right? Our government could.
Our government can. Our government can break open those millions of laws and say, well, we'll find something if we want to, right? And even if they don't, the investigation can ruin my life. So they don't even need to prosecute you to ruin your life.
Well, that's true.
And that's the real danger, right, in these kinds of things. It's that our
government. Yes. But I think there's a real danger here, regardless, because we are really getting into the surveillance state, which is probably getting back to the 1984 you were talking about, Jason. But the point is, that just recently, the deputy director of the FBI was testifying on Capitol Hill. They have this database that they're supposed to manage properly, or they have access to some database or some kind of stuff and things like that, which require a certain amount of clearance and a certain amount of requirements before you could access the database. The FBI accessed that database, which have personal information of American citizens. Access that database 278,000 times. You know what the FBI director, the deputy director of the FBI told Congress why that happened? It was unintentional, is what he said. 278,000 times. And he said it was unintentional.
Like I clicked on that porn site 278 times. Yeah. Oh, that's a mistake over and over again.
But yeah, that's kind of the point, right? They're deliberately violating the constitutional rights of millions, hundreds of thousands of Americans in this place.
Absolutely.
And no one's being held accountable. Not a single person.
And that's the problem.
And we are out of time, Leon. My apologies. Guys, thank you for saving my butt. And I got to edit that. Thank you for being here for the show. And please remember to love everybody, and good night.
Check out the Knuckleheads of Liberty.
Yeah.